So, Shane, do you want to start us off as always? I think this is the most interesting player in the Eagles draft class. I've said it. What are the basic sort of numbers, etc., on Smith? Start us off.
Okay, so Ainias Smith is 5'9" and 3/8, which is 8th percentile among wide receivers. He is 190 pounds, which is 24th percentile. If you look at his spider chart, everything is just stacked on top of each other in the middle, except for his 92nd percentile bench press. And I always think spider charts like that are fascinating. If you look at his relative athletic score, he's only got a 7.36. He did not have, elite 40 times. In fact, the only things that are green on his spider or on his RAS chart are his 21 reps on the bench press and his 3-cone. He's extremely small. He's not really explosive when it comes to athletic testing. Now, if we talk about the stats, last season, and again, this is among 135 receivers who had 70 or more targets. He ranked 33rd in yards after catch per reception at 6.7. He was 6th in drop percentage, dropping only 1.9% of his targets. And he was 12th in missed tackles forced at 20. And then just overall his versatility, if you look at his snaps throughout his 5-year career at Texas A&M, he took 227 snaps aligned in the backfield, 1,364 in the slot, 419 at the boundary, and 338 snaps on special teams. So again, Jonny has an article up on Ainias Smith. His article for Trotter hasn't posted yet. It will soon, but you can go check that out. But Jonny, what stuck out to you when you watched Smith?
He's very fun. That's my basic analysis, is he's such a fun player. Basically, he, when you use the frame like Swiss Army knife, like he can do everything. Whether players like that sometimes just don't work because they don't do everything well, but he really can do everything. You mentioned the snaps. Like, he's a running back, he's a receiver, he's that classic player that I think the league is going towards. I think the 49ers, as always, are sort of taking the lead in this, where he blurs the lines between, is he a back, is he a receiver? He's a little bit of both, but I think the problem. So he is much more of a receiver in the back. He is a receiver with sort of running back skills on things like jet sweeps, even screens, like yards after the catch, make defenders miss. Like, he looks like a classic Kansas City Chiefs pick in that sense. You can imagine everyone going mad if Andy Reid drafted him. Not a explosive long speed guy, although it's funny because he has snaps where he burns by defensive backs, and when you see his 40 time and you see Shipley's 40 time and you think testing's weird, but short area quickness, I describe him as quicker rather than fast, which means 10 yards which is more important than long speed most of the time as well. His route running is the thing that really impressed me. So two things really surprised me. I expected him to be like, the fast slot fun guy, jet sweep. Everyone's got that guy. Like Malachi Corley was my guy in this year's class. Actually, he's more polished than I thought, which is why I'm a little surprised he went where he did. And I'll talk about why when we get to the weaknesses. But he's good at the top of his routes. He can run out. He's exposed out of his break. He has some really nice nuances to his route running. There's a really good clip that I don't know if we'll show today, but if not, it's in the article from Ben Fennell, where he's running like a deep over route, or I said route. The amount of times I use the American phrase, I go back and forth on that all the time, Shane. Over route, I'm going to say British, stay true to myself, where his head and his neck, his shoulders are all leaning towards the inside, and when he cuts it outside, and you see nuances that you want to see from him. Also, though he's really small, he is really tough. So special teams experience, blocking experience, extremely willing blocker, extremely willing to take hits in the middle of the field, can hang on some difficult catches, good contact balance. I think people have described him as a budget Deebo Samuel, and he's a little bit like that. He's just a fun player to watch in general. I'm talking about how much fun he is, Shane. Do you want to queue up some of the clips that you have so we can talk about some of the things that he does really well? Because if you haven't watched any of his highlights, I do recommend going to watch him. Someone on my article compared him as a Golden Tate type, and I like that comparison quite a lot as well. So talk to me about a few of these clips.
So he's not a burner by any means, but he is slippery and he can change directions really quickly. And so this play I just think is so fun. He's running a crossing route here, and you see him catch this ball, and all his momentum's carrying him to the sideline, and he's going to be able to get upfield instead of going out of bounds. But watch the move that he puts on defenders on the sideline here. just that side juke, like that's all over his film. He loves to get that guy running at him sideways, and then he's just able to juke back to the middle of the field. And he makes 3 guys miss here and is able to get into the end zone on a play that he probably should have been down inside the 10. And that's what you see a lot from him. It's not running away from guys. It's just that slipperiness in the open field. That was one of the biggest things that really jumped out to me watching his stuff.
Shane, can I just say as well, when you think of the player in your head that we're talking about, you probably think of like what I think of: bubble screens, jet sweeps, quick slants. He runs a lot of deep over, which I think is quite common, and then he runs a lot of really good corner, like good corner routes, post corner. Like that's his best route, I think, is that intermediate out. And we know that Hurts throws a beautiful corner route. It's probably Hurts' best ball, actually. I think that intermediate out. The Eagles run a lot of levels or 3-level stretch plays, or they have done in the past. Whether they'll continue to do so, we'll see. But Hurts throws a really nice intermediate out ball, and I think that's his best route. He's not just a short player. He's not just good in the quick game. He can run some intermediate routes as well. You see him at the Senior Bowl running the deep in for dagger, which is a 15-20 yard in breaking route basically, and he dives low and catches it. He's a little bit of he's a little bit good at everything. Any other clips you want to show before I talk about why I think he may have fallen outside of the top 3 rounds? Because the way we're talking about him makes it sound like he should have gone a lot earlier.
Yeah, I've got a couple more here. I actually have 4 clips of him. So my second one, you would think a guy this profile would struggle into contact, and he really doesn't. He's good at, this is him in the slot here, and he's going to take a huge shot at the catch point here. Now, he is not a contested catch receiver, but he is not afraid to elevate over the middle of the field and take a hit, and he hangs onto the ball. And you see that in his drop numbers. I mean, that's a big hit for a 5'9" guy to take in the back as he's catching the ball, and he just hangs on to it. And so he's a tremendously tough player. I think he's reliable over the middle of the field. He's really good at sitting down in zone coverage. And then you've got his punt return ability. Now, his punt return ability is a mixed bag, because I'll show this one and there's another one I'm not going to show. And there's a common theme in these. And the common theme is that he muffs the punt and then recovers it and returns it for a touchdown. And you really don't want to see, your punt returner putting the ball in the turf, much less twice in one season. But both times he stays with it and he runs it back for a touchdown. And this one doesn't go for a touchdown, but watch the number of guys that he makes miss up the field here. He has another one he returns for a touchdown. But he's up the sideline, that juke to the middle of the field. 1 guy misses, 2 guys, 3 guys miss. And, it slows him down enough that he gets run down from behind. But he's very dynamic, and I think you could see him used as a punt returner. With the new kick return rules, maybe you see him used that way too. Now, the last one I want to show is, we talked about his deep threat, his speed. He's more short area quickness. But I just want you to watch this rep and see if you notice anything about it. This is going to be a touchdown to him. He's running upfield here. And I just want you tell me if you notice something on this clip here. And the cut's kind of made off screen, but all of a sudden he's 5 yards behind the defensive back. And Jonny, do you know why I showed this particular clip?
Is it because of who he beats, Shane, on the route?
It is. That defensive back that he's 5 yards behind, I'll pause it here and you can catch it. That's Brian Branch, drafted by the Lions, fell way too far and had a tremendous rookie season. And that's Ainias Smith just burning Brian Branch, who is at his best in the slot, out of the slot for a deep touchdown. So that's a nice little gem from 2 years ago. So he can get vertical, but that's not necessarily his game. But I just thought that was a funny one.
Yeah, I included that in the article. It's a bit unfair on Brian Branch because it's such a hard cover when you're in the slot and you can go left, right. Right, we've sang Smith's praises for a while. He was a 5th round pick, wasn't he? He wasn't a 4th for Shipley. So if you're wondering, well, how did this guy drop? Because there's a few comments coming in as well about sort of how much fun he is. Antonio, who watched him a lot of Texas A&M, talking about how good he is. And you're right, when you turn on the film, he looks that good. Anthony also saying if you watch his highlights, he looks awesome, and I agree. So reasons why. Right, I have a couple of theories about this. The obvious answer that if you want me to give me is that he's a slot-only guy, I think, at the next level. people are going to hate this comparison, but his college film is a little bit Jalen Reagor-y. And remember that Jalen Reagor was a first-round pick, by the way, so the college film was fun. But the problem with those guys are sometimes they get forced outside and they can't play outside. I don't think he's going to run through physical contacts. Like, I think physical corners that can press him, get their hands on him, he's going to really struggle. So I think he's going to play in the slot only. As we mentioned, he's not a burner. So when you look at teams who have, like, I always talk about like the criteria, they have sort of like numbers that they want to aim for at each position to limit sort of risk. He's a 4.55 guy at 190. There are certain teams that are going to say straight away, do you know what, we don't want a 4.55 guy who's 190. Just, I'm not saying that's the right way of doing it, but teams have these like sort of criteria, and we'll talk about actually more of that with Trotter coming up next. So I think he's a slot only receiver. I think he's been injured in the past and he's very small, when you always worry about guys that are smaller who can only play in the slot. I think the two big reasons why I think he fell are basically the modern NFL doesn't like slot only players. I listened to a really interesting discussion with one of my favorite podcasts, The Read Optional, with Ollie Connolly and whoever else is the co-host on there, talking about who's the guy who came out in the first round? Lab McConkey, or second round this year. Basically talking about his value only works if he can play outside. And we spoke about this pre-draft as well, is that teams don't like having slot only guys because they have so many players that can line up in the slot. So if you stick Devontae Smith, AJ Brown and Smith out there, you're going to expect that he's going to be in the slot. Therefore, teams can project where Brown and Devontae Smith are going to line up. It just makes it more predictable. If you compare that to someone like Paris Campbell, who's probably going to start in the slot this year for the Eagles, he's not 5'9", 190. Like, I can't remember what Paris Campbell weighed in at the combine, but I'm pretty sure he is a lot bigger than you would think as I'm frantically Googling it. I'm sure he was like 6'1", 6 foot 205, so bigger. And that means he can potentially play outside. So he gives you more versatility. And a lot of teams don't like having slot only players because it limits what you can do offensive, sort of design wise. The second reason is blocking wide receivers have a massive part in the run game these days. So if you ever watch the Rams, they're the absolute best at this. Cooper Kupp and Nakua are unbelievably good at blocking in the run game. They have a lot of clips where they run duo and they actually use their wide receiver to motion in and block the C gap. Like, you can't do that. He wants to be a good blocker, Smith, and he tries really hard, but he's 5'9", 190. You're not going to really get him taking on linebackers. And he tries and he has effort, but he's not. Nothing to do with how exciting he is as a player. I think all the positives we said are true. I just think smaller guys that aren't burners, like when you're talking about like your Worthies, you go in the first round running like in the 4.2s. When you draft smaller guys, they need to be exceptional at something. And I don't think he's a burner. I think having a slot only player limits your versatility. And I'm not saying he will definitely be slot only, but I think if you play him outside and he's going to start getting pressed by corners, I think he might struggle. There's a few clips of him at the Senior Bowl where he struggled with physicality as well. And I think blocking wise in the run game is a big deal. So that's like my sort of summary of why I think he fell, considering how fun he is. In saying that, I think this year he'll be a special teams and a sort of minimal touch guy you can use. And I think potentially he could even take that wide receiver free job off Paris Campbell this year or next year and could be a really handy special teamer who's your wide receiver free, wide receiver 4, and won't kill you like Quez Watkins did this past year. So I really like the pick. I just think it's fair for balance to point out he is a 5th round pick, and there are reasons why receivers like him don't go as early as maybe we'd like.
Yeah. He also doesn't separate well against man coverage. He's really good against zone, like sitting down in those soft spots, but I didn't think he separates super well against man. Although, if a team is giving you man coverage, you have 3 guys in AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert who generate great matchups against man. And so he would be your 4th option at best. Maybe your 5th option at best if you think about Jalen Hurts being able to run against man coverage as well. But ultimately, Ainias Smith, he cannot, his ceiling in the NFL is a wide receiver 3. Like, he cannot, there is no chance that I'm going to get old takes exposed on this someday because he's a wide receiver 1 for a team. He just can't. His skill set, his body type, it doesn't have wide receiver 1 or even really 2 ability. And that's part of why he falls. If you're going to roll the dice, you want to roll the dice, most teams, on a guy that, hey, if he hits, it's Puka Nacua. you know, and that's not Ainias Smith, but he brings intriguing potential as a wide receiver 3, especially for a team that has guys clearly ahead of him in the pecking order. And so I think that's part of why he fell down, but why I'm excited to see him play.